The last section of the class dedicated to the cyber architecture intend to explore some of the most advanced steps in development of the contemporary architecture. And we will see that it's quite controversial. Some elements are very challenging, are interesting, could be considered definitely in a very positive view, but as we assert also in other script, there is some issue that has a profound influence on the contemporary perception of the architectural work, architectural field. In this moment, we want to illustrate several topics which can be listed as parametric architecture, cellular automata, agent-based model, artificial intelligence and architecture. And we will also illustrate some idea about IoT, Internet of Things, because it is a fundamental element in the contemporary life. We start with the parametric architecture. Now, we already discussed in the previous section of this class that very often the parametric architecture is misinterpreted by many people. In a general point of view, parametric architecture, it is architecture which is based on parameters. What does it mean? Parametric architecture, parameters means everything concerning architecture is transformed into numbers. And this is a quite remarkable innovation if we consider the classic vision of architecture. If we discuss about the classical architecture, which it means the pre-modern architecture, we find definitely that the rules are very different from the contemporary life. The architecture was based on classicism, was based on the rule of Vitruvius. It was based on orders. It is a field which concerns culture and not only function. Architecture was one of the important form of arts in the previous centuries. There is no distinction very often in between painting, sculpture, and architecture. And it is not a case that some of the greatest architects in the history, like Michelangelo, Raffaello, and so on, were both artists and architects of the greatest level. Basically, in the past, there is always a form of artistic vision in the field of architecture. Architects are always great in drawings. They are very cultivated people. And they are not only technicians. They are very strong in the history of art. And not like in the modernist vision of Bauhaus, led by Walter Gropius, where the history was intentionally cancelled by the curricula of the student. More and more, during the modern time, and even strongly in the modernist architecture and also in the post-modernist architecture, but in the modernist architecture this tendency is even stronger, the architecture become function. Now, the parametric architecture, which it means the architecture conceived in form of numbers, start from the engineering revolution during the 18th and 19th century. We have seen that in that period of the history, the architecture was based on calculation. The structures for the first time was not based anymore on the tradition, but there is a very strong mathematical calculation process during the creation of the iron structure. So the mathematics and the statics become one of the very important methodology for the creation of architecture. In the past, it was not like this. For example, the Gothic cathedral, but also the architecture of the Renaissance, and even more in the ancient time, there is no form of calculation. There is geometry, proportion, ratio, for example, the golden ratio. Everything was created by a very strong sense of geometry. That is absolutely correct. So, during the modern and modernist age, the architecture becomes something more parametrized, or to be more precise, the architecture becomes progressively based on numbers, on quantity. What does it mean? If we investigate the work of Walter Gropius and one of his most important student, Neufert, who created a very famous handbook for the standard in architecture, that kind of tendency is very clear. The work of Gropius, Neufert, but also somehow Le Corbusier was based on calculation. For example, we didn't touch this topic, but in other of our script we mention this element, and it is a quite famous topic. If we concern the existence minimum in Germany, we perfectly catch the idea. What is the existence minimum? The existence minimum, which means the minimum parameters, the minimum element to have a comfortable apartment for the living condition. The concept of the existence minimum is in the post-war period, the first, of course, I'm referring to the First World War, there is the problem of the reconstruction in Germany. And the architect questioned the problem of which one is the minimum standard to create a comfortable and healthy apartment for the common people. It's cheap, fast to realize, hygienic, enough lighting, and so on. This concept is not banal. It is a great achievement of the modernism, but it was a different mental process. Because if in the case of the ancient time, proportion, beauty, order was the key point to generate architecture, in the modernist time, the key point is not anymore aesthetic, beauty, or reference to the classicism, but it was parameters. What is the minimum size of a bedroom, of a toilet? What is the size of the window? That was the new question in the architecture field. And that one was exactly parameters. Now, this tendency, which was already very strong in the modernist time, become even more and more strong in the contemporary life. In fact, the real meaning of parametric architecture, it is architecture based on parameters. Numbers everywhere. So the aesthetic, the concerning about the space, light, and so on, it is no more an idea of poetics, reference of the past, quality, but only simple quantity, parameters, number. And then it makes all the difference of this word. For the scholar and people who do research, it's very clear the distinction in between quantitative and qualitative analysis. Quantitative analysis is very simple issue. You need to collect data, you need to process the data, which means numbers, parameters, and after you have interpret the data, which is the difficult and tricky part. In the case of qualitative analysis, that is a quality. Why one cake is more delicious in that shop and not in another shop? Why a certain beauty is better than another one? There is no any parameters which can investigate those kind of quality. There is a progressive and evil tendency to confuse quantity and quality, but that is a mistake, absolutely without any compromise. There is a tendency which is even more tricky, but it's very clear to discover, which intend to say, according with the preference of the audience, the people who more prefer like a certain kind of situation, that it is better. So in this case, the common vision is try to transform quality into quantity. For example, more people like that restaurant, so according with the number of preference, like or dislike, like in internet, that it is better. So again, there is a tendency to transform quality, people like that restaurant, into quantity, number of like. But it's a mistake. Be very clear. The quantity, there is no way in the world to transform quality into quantity. The trick is the number of preferences of a certain choice It is a statistical analysis, but it's a still number. It is not quality. There is no way to parameterize quality. Also because the quality sometimes is not objective. For example, the quality of the light in the Japanese classic architecture, it is something very beautiful, simply amazing. If you visit a classic Japanese architecture, traditional Chinese architecture, but this is even more clear in the great ancient temple of the Khmer Empire, Angkor Wat, and the area of Siem Reap, the quality of the light, the quality of the color are simply amazing. We human beings feel very attracted by such kind of beauty. And this is clear. But at the same time, there is no number which can explain that kind of feeling. The number of the visitors doesn't mean anything. So if in the past the qualitative contents of an architecture was dominant, nowadays there is a progressive tendency to transform everything into numbers, into parameters. Many of our research, they are based on quantity, but finally the output, it is only numbers. It doesn't mean quality. That have to be extremely clear. A lot of modern fast food or food industry, for example, they have a very accurate parameterization of their products, but the quality is simply garbage. We all know, but it's very successful. It's very successful because the people like, or the people are very attracted by a certain kind of food. But quality and quantity, in this case, are very different standard. In the case of parametric architecture, it is true that everything can be parameterized, not the quality, but most of the element can be parameterized. And this is the contemporary tendency in architecture. But attention, there is a misunderstanding. Generally talking, architecture is something like the work of Zaha Hadid and Schumacher, but many other architecture offices are based on this kind of process. They are considering parametric architecture. Parametric architecture, it was used very clear by the Italian-Armenian architect Massimiliano Fuksas, for example, in the terminal airport in Shenzhen. That is a real parametric architecture. What does concern the parametric architecture? In that case, the parametric architecture concern in the accurate calculation, for example, of cost of construction according with the curve and the shape of the building. Let me explain better. We all know that that building, it is a very beautiful shape. It was created by curve beam. Of course, linear flat surface, linear beam are cheaper than curve beam. That is obvious. The question is, what is the limit of the curve in order to be performative and cheap enough to be produced, but beautiful enough? There is a limit. The radius have to be less than a certain number and more than another number. So, who decide the curve of the beam? Who decide the shape of the building? Just capricious? It is just the architect can generate every kind of form? In the past, yes. The crazy architect sit on the table and sketch nightmare, sketch everything he want, and then the client pay. But in the case of the Shenzhen airport, that is very different because the architect have limit, have budget, have a cost analysis. So the parametric architecture in that case, it was parameters, numbers, input in the software, and that kind of numbers limit the creativity of the architect. The architect cannot generate every kind of curve, every form of shape that his insane mind could imagine. But in a very rational way, in a very scientific way, the work of Fuchsas was limited by the parameters, and one of those parameters was the cost. If the architect generates too many crazy stuff, too many strange curves, too many impossible shapes, the cost simply bomb, explode. This is why, in order to control the cost, the architect have to limit their creativity. He cannot choose every kind of form. He can generate many kind of curves, many kind of unusual shape, but not everything he wants. The cost control, it is one of the parameters which are included into the software, which limit the possibility of the architecture. The architect could say, in this point I want a very crazy spiral. And the cost analysis inside the software saying, yes, good idea, but you can't, because it costs too much. Or you review with your client the total cost of the building, and then I could accept. Otherwise, the computer say, no, you can't, simply because it costs too much. Another parameters, the real parametric architecture, could say, attention, you can create as much glass as you want in a facade, but consider that according with the climate of the area where you are going to build your architecture, there is a very strong limitation because that climate, it is too hot, too cold, too windy. So the glass, it is a very bad idea in terms of energy consumption. If you architect, if you human being, if you want to control the cost of maintenance, the energy consumption of the building, you must be careful because you can't have a glass facade. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, you like. The client love it, but it costs too much. So the parameter that you, human being, include in me, computer or software or in parametric system, then I have to limit your imagination because you can't. You simply can't. You can use a lot of glass, but in the percentage as, for example, 50% of the facade. That kind of calculation, it is determined by cost analysis, by the consumption of the energy, or by any parameters and standard that the human being decide. So the architect in the parametric design, it is not free anymore. It is very bad, we can say. But the completely freedom, it exists only in the mind of the insane people. Life has a rule, architecture has a rule. We can imagine, we can do some crazy stuff, but then it is called avant-garde. In the practical work, we have always to consider a realistic utopia, a realistic dream. Important is the parametric architecture concern parameters, number, standards, which limit or better drive, suggest the architecture, the idea of the architect. And the parametric architecture can be defined by everything: cost, energy, even like or dislike, statistical analysis. It can be driven by behavior of the people, habit of the local population, by thousands and millions of parameters. It doesn't matter which one you choose. But parametric architecture means only this one: a parameters, standard, number, process, which drive or limit, as you want, the activity of the architect. And this is a very remarkable and very innovative process. On the contrary, parametric architecture is not the architecture with fluent form. Parametric architecture is not architecture generated by specific software to coordinate form into a special shape. Parametric architecture is a much wider conception. Now, there is one additional important element that we have to discuss. From parametric to digital, or better, more accurately, data-driven analysis and data-driven design. It is something very similar to the parametric architecture. the data-driven design and analysis, they are all process of analysis and consequential design which generate architecture from and only from data. Everything is generated by data. It doesn't concern anything about quality. Intentionally, there are two different universes. Beautiful, it is what a cultivated person like. Data, it is numbers. And there are no possibility of connection in between the two. By the way, I want to remark one element which is not totally close to our topic, but very important to discuss. There is a common misunderstanding. And there is a misunderstanding that what I like is beautiful. What I like is good. And this is a completely stupid assertion, because what I like counts nothing. It is my only preference, it is only my own opinion, and my own opinion can be completely wrong because it is uncultivated. It is not important in the history of the idea. The only point which can be considered quality, beautiful, good is from expert. Finish. People who are not expert in a certain field have to shut up and keep their own taste by themselves. Since St. Augustine, which say, it is not beautiful what the people like because some people like ugliness. And this is a statement. So, in the future, and when we discuss about beauty of architecture, beauty of music, good taste of something, I am going to refer only to the strong base analysis by expert and cultivated person. It is not the opinion of someone with no name, no experience, or no idea. That counts nothing. It is a rumor. It is the background rumor. Count nothing. It's a buzz. That's it. In terms of beauty, we can discuss of beauty or good taste or good looking only from people who are expert in that specific field. And that is qualitative analysis. No more discussion on this point. This is quite clear. In terms of data-driven analysis and data-driven design is a completely different field because numbers count and only numbers count. Now we can discuss a little bit about when the data can be used into architecture. Well, there are many research under processing, and they are research. What does it mean, research? Research means we don't know the result. We are going to guess. We are going to elaborate. It is, we can say, the last frontiers of the discussion in architecture, but also in medical, but also in computer science. I give you a very simple example which concerns the research of one of my team members. In urban analysis, a very important statement, a very important research is how the people use the space. For example, you could have one square or one architecture or a certain place, and then you have to understand how the people move inside the space. Simply because we could use the behavior of the people, in this case is the massive quantity of people, how they use the space in order to understand what is the preference and optimize the performance of building or public place. In this case, there are a lot of methods to acquire data. For example, GIS, for example, drone. We acquire the data, we acquire the movement of the people, and then finally we elaborate into with a certain kind of software, and we generate data. This is a typical case of data-driven analysis. We have the behavior of the people in a certain space, or the behavior or the preference of the people inside a specific building or texture or color or whenever is it. And after, those data have to be used for the production of architecture. And that one, it is called data-driven design. This is very useful in a certain situation, something like airport, or harbor, or square, or train station, or even road. For example, the optimization of the traffic in a city, it is based all of this in this kind of data. It is not quality at all. We are not going to discuss about the quality, the beauty, the good light, the good material, the good feeling inside one airport. We are only discussing of optimization of the performance of that specific building. That's it. In this case, the software are very complicated to use. The world is still discussing which kind of parameters, which kind of data, how to process the data, which software is better, which algorithm is better to understand the meaning of those data, of those numbers. But that is a clear research. A very important statement in this area is what the data means. Because finally, after a huge analysis, after a huge investigation, you have numbers, a million and billion of numbers. But the numbers means nothing. The necessity is to understand what those numbers means, what the number shows, how can be interpreted the data. If you have a series of numbers, thousands of numbers or diagrams, well, only a human intelligence, and in the future we can see also artificial intelligence, only human intelligence can understand what is the final meaning of those numbers. This is very important, and this is one of the most controversial points in the data-driven analysis and data-driven design. In the modern time, we are discussing about a very famous term. It is IoT. IoT means Internet of Things, and it is very related on the previous discussion, the data-driven analysis and design. What does it mean, IoT? What does it mean, Internet of Things? Internet of Things, it is a very famous concept nowadays. It means all the relationship and inter-exchange in between physical life and digital life. I give you a very simple example in order to understand. You decide to have a travel from your home to another country. For example, you love to visit China. This decision starts with the intention. Physical, you are a physical person into your physical room. Then you take your computer or your mobile phone and you start to plan your travel. You start to understand how much costs the airplane ticket. You find the airplane ticket that you like most, it is most appropriate for your finance, and you buy it. Then finally, you must open the door, eventually take your car, or better, subway, to reach the airport, check in, you are going to the airplane, you fly to your destination, Beijing or Roma, it doesn't matter. You arrive, check out, police control, subway, hotel, and then you can start to enjoy your life. Fine. Every movement, every step you do, it is recorded by internet. For example, your physical position, it is recorded by the GPS of your telephone. So internet knows exactly where you are, and the police too. Then you log in into the website to buy the ticket, and internet knows that you are going to select that specific ticket, and you pay that specific amount of money, and you will sit in that specific chair in the airplane. Then you take the subway, you buy the ticket. Mostly probable, there are a lot of innovative systems, for example, in China, where the ticket, it is controlled by the mobile phone. And then The internet knows that you, with your mobile phone and your IP number, go inside in that moment in the subway. They know where you go out. They know when you do the check-in because you present your passport and your ticket, it is checked. Then you have police control, camera, CCTV, and so on. I don't want to make it longer. Basically, every movement and every decision that you are doing with your mobile phone or with your computer, but also with your physical movement in the city thanks to the camera, everything it is recorded and stored into internet. So, in this case, physical generate digital data. Physical entity, you in your apartment, become digital. And at the same time, all this kind of huge data that the world collect from physical become digital. It is used for statistical analysis. For example, a very famous search engine in US, they all collect data, which web page you visit, what is your preference, how much time you spend on that specific website. There are, of course, engine which is completely protect the privacy of the people, or software like Tor browser, which did not share your information to internet. If you want to be completely safe, then you must go to that kind of stuff. So those kind of digital data which burn digital, the time that you visit a certain website, your preference, how much money you have in your credit card, those kind of data, finally become physical because, for example, it is used to build subway in that specific corner and airport in that specific place only because of the data. The choice of these big infrastructures and the market, the choice of the market, it is not random. It is not the guessing of a super entity or a brain or a great genius or a great entrepreneur. It is simply a statistical analysis. People like very much that specific hamburger, so the company knows at the very beginning what to offer. A very famous company for movie production, they are very successful simply because they create a very good algorithm to collect the preferences of the audience, and then they produce the movie that for sure the audience like, simply because it is statistical. If most of the people eat beef, for example, it is more safe and definitely more successful for the company of hamburger to produce more beef hamburger instead of chicken. For example, in China, the people love very much chicken. And this is why the local menu of the big multinational corporation of the food are more oriented into chicken. It is a kind of safe gambling. Every form of investment is a gambling, but if you have parameters which came from IoT, then you are more safe in the creation of the line production. That is exactly the same for architecture. How big, for example, should be a train station? How big should be an airport? Where to locate an airport? How to locate the store? Or in addition, how big should be the size of average apartment in China or Rome or Paris? Who decide? The data design, the market design. The market analysis could show that most of the people like an apartment in between, for example, 30 to 45 square meters. Or the market analysis, the data shows that the average person in a family is 2 or 3. And then how much square meters a family of 3 people needs? For example, 100 square meters. Then that is a parameters which have to be included into the design of an architecture or public square. It is completely the same. That it is data-driven analysis, data-driven design based on IoT. There are a couple of topics that have to be discussed now. In order to conclude this section of our class, we need to investigate other three ideas which are very important in the contemporary debate on architecture: cellular automata and artificial intelligence and agent-based modeling. Those three terms are extremely complex in the process of operating, but very simple in terms of general idea. We start with cellular automata. Cellular automata, it is a very old software which was created in the 70s. The software is very basic, but the consequences are extremely important, extremely interesting. They are so important that some high-level scholar and computer engineer and physicist can assert that the cellular automata is the basic process of all the universe. In other words, it seems that the cellular automata is the basic rule of behavior of everything in the universe. Now, the initial software for cellular automata, it's really very simple. It was a very simple rule. It was created by a grid. It doesn't matter how big is the grid, but have to be big enough to don't be trivial. For example, a grid of 10 for 10 squares, and one element was put inside, for example, a black square against the white square. And the rule is the system have to proliferate, have to grow. The living cell can be replicated, and the two rules are the mutual distance cannot be too far or the cell die, and cannot be too close or the cell die. It is exactly like the human behavior somehow. If we are in a very limited space with too many people, the system collapses because of the problem of the living space, which have to be big enough to have a certain kind of privacy. If the people are too lonely, also the system collapses because it can be generated by depression. Sure, if you are a monk who live in the desert, that is your ideal condition, but is an exception. So, thanks of this very simple command, very simple software, the environment, the cell, the grid and the cell react in a way that no one can predict. The computer engineer did not put many rules, something very basic: the size of the cell, the replication process, and density, not too much, not too few. That's it. How the system evolve, no one knows. It is typical chaos. Chaos in the sense that not randomness, not mess. Chaos, it means from the initial rule, we don't know what is the final output. And in fact, the cellular automata generate so many possibilities that the final output cannot be predictable. Now, the cellular automata is a sort of self-generation of situation, and we are not able to predict how it works and which one is the final result. Now, the cellular automata work extremely well in front of situations something like human behavior prediction. It is simply a way to describe how the life works. Everything in the universe seems to follow those kind of cellular automata process. This is why it is used in traffic prediction, in disaster control, in the design of the escape way. It is used for war. It is used for a terrorist attack. Everything, it is very based on this kind of simple process of calculation. This is very close to the agent-based model. But the agent-based model is absolutely a much more complicated stuff. Because the agent-based model, it is also the simulation of the human behavior, but also cell behavior or virus behavior or terrorist attack or whenever is it. It is based on entity, agent, which has multiple parameters, multiple elements. A classic parameters is attraction and repellent. I give you a very simple idea. If you study a temple, the main god in the temple, it is definitely an attractor. Everyone won't go to that god. If you have a road with a restaurant, for example, it is an attractor. And a public toilet, it is a repellent, for example. Or place which is more dangerous, it is a repellent. Or place which is empty, it is a repellent. Place which has a much better view, it is an attractor, and so on. The problem in this case are many. First of all, how to calibrate the repellent and the attractor, because it is not an absolute number. For example, if you have a restaurant with a free food, definitely it is very attractive. So the level of attractiveness is very high. If there is a shop which give gold as a gift, then it is very attractive. If you have a place where people are killed in every kind of condition, that it is a repellent. If the place has a very bad smell or is very bad or very ugly or extremely dangerous, that is a repellent. But this is an idealistic 1-0. There is another form, much more sophisticated, to understand in which way that specific attractor or repellent could be attractive for the people or not attractive for the people. In which grade? For example, a restaurant is not completely attractive. It is attractive, for example, in a certain way according with the quality of the food. And it is not attractive in every hour of the day, but only breakfast, lunchtime, and dinner. Other time of the day, it is much less attractive. So, the point is, the agent-based model, which is based on repellent and attractor, have hundreds of parameters to calibrate. The calibration is the problem. Both agent-based model and cellular automata are old software. It is old research. It is not a very advanced research in the modern time. But a lot of interesting processes are still attractive in the use of these two software, but many problems are still not solved. There is the last and very advanced process of this research in architecture, and it concerns the artificial intelligence. Now, attention, because artificial intelligence in this moment in the history, it is not like in the science fiction movie, a robot which has the similar intelligence of the human being. In this moment, artificial intelligence is still in the early stage, but very soon it will reach a much higher grade, and then it could become dangerous for the human being. So I am a little bit scared about artificial intelligence, but it is a very clear trend, and I don't think there is any way to stop it. Artificial intelligence, it is mostly based on data collection, data mining. We already assert that there are a lot of data in the world of internet. How to manage? Human being can't anymore. The data are too much. So it is created artificial intelligence to dig data in the universe of internet and organized according with the specific parameters, intention, goal. That is the basic definition of artificial intelligence. And then there is also artificial intelligence in learning, machine learning. What is machine learning? Machine learning is exactly like a child. If you teach to a child a certain kind of behavior, attention, don't eat too much candy because it's bad for your teeth. Attention, don't touch the boiling water because you can be hurt. And the child learn At the same time, the machine learning, it is based on, again, data acquiring, and the computer is able to understand that a certain kind of choice can be successful or unsuccessful. And according with statistics, the next generation of choice can be based on the previous generation of choice. And this one in order to optimize the final output. Now, the combination in between cellular automata, agent-based model, artificial intelligence, it is a very promising new step in architecture. There are a lot of short movie in YouTube, you can simply look around, which show the self-generation of facade for a building. What does it mean? It means that you give the shape of a high-rise building or a residential building or a villa, and automatically the software generates endless solution. Endless is too much. Many solutions which are all correct in terms of the parameter that you insert inside at the very beginning. So the final output can be all fine, just according with the choice or the taste or the mood or the feeling of the client at that specific moment, because the performance, it is always respected. This element of design, it is very innovative, and it is the next step for architecture. So the architect, it is much less important in terms of choice, because in theory, you can put all the parameters that Frank Lloyd Wright used in his design, or every possible choice of the client inside, and then automatically the computer can generate the best villa or shopping mall or skyscraper or hotel according with the preference of your client. That is a very advanced model. Does it mean that the work of the architect become to the end? I think the work of the architect will change a lot. Something like, if in the past there are a lot of jobs related with the typewriter machine, now the typewriter simply become obsolete, and everything it is related on computer. The history evolve, so also the profession of the architect have to evolve. In the past, a lot of jobs are related on profession that now doesn't exist anymore. In the future, it will be the same. The architect will be changed, or at least will be completely reviewed. This is the last frontiers of the contemporary architecture, and probably it is overlook on the future.